Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, yesterday, the great conspiracy theory was Trump, Assange, Bannon and Farage bound together in an unholy alliance, as if I was at the centre of some extraordinary spider's web, all of which was linked to Russia. There were even accusations that UKIP had been funded from Russian sources, all sorts of extraordinary things. But the story rolls on because today, the special counsel in America, Robert Mueller, has laid charges against Trump's ex-campaign manager, Paul Manafort, a former business associate called Rick Gates, and a former Trump aide called George Papadopoulos. The charges, it has to be said, are pretty serious. They relate chiefly to money laundering charges. There is also, a further more serious charge of conspiracy against the United States of America. But, and I think this is the important thing to bear in mind, the job of this special counsel was to investigate whether there was any collusion between President Trump's campaign and Russia during the year 2016. I guess the trouble is, once you've appointed a special counsel, they can kind of take the investigation off into lots of different areas, because none of the charges that have been laid against these three men, it seems to me, have anything to do with 2016 and collusion with Russia. And indeed, the indictment makes absolutely clear there is no reference at all to President Trump. There's no reference at all to the Kremlin. So I'm wondering quite what all this means. The White House Press Secretary, Sarah Huckabee, within the last hour, has reiterated this point.
The real collusion scandal, as we've said several times before, has everything to do with the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS, and Russia. There's clear evidence of the Clinton campaign colluding with Russian intelligence to spread disinformation and smear the president to influence the election. We've been saying from day one there's been no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, and nothing in the indictment today changes that at all.
But the George Papadopoulos agreement is about the campaign. It is specifically about the campaign.
It has nothing to do with the activities of the campaign. It has to do with his failure to tell the truth. That doesn't have anything to do with the campaign or the campaign's activities.
But it is the clearest evidence yet of ties between the Trump campaign and Russian officials. So
again, there are no activities or official capacity in which the Trump campaign was engaged in any of these activities. Most of them took place well before the campaign ever even existed.
So that's the White House official response. Despite that, of course, there are journalists in Washington today describing this as Trump's worst ever day. Well, to get a view on this, I'm going to go to Sebastian Gorka, Chief Strategist of the Make America Great Campaign Coalition and former Deputy Assistant to President Trump. Sebastian, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Good evening. Welcome again to LBC.
I didn't know you were such a dangerous man, Nigel.
Oh, well, yes, of course, I'm very dangerous. I mean, I'm a person of interest to the FBI, and according to the Guardian Group newspapers, as I say, I am the key link to everybody involved in this, and I'm also, you'd like to know, Seb, I'm sure, I'm the bag man. I'm the guy that carries all the secret files between the President and Julian Assange in the embassy here in London.
Nigel, stop it. Quiet.
So, I mean, clearly, I'm a very important and very dangerous person. But I want to ask you, we've heard what Sarah Huckabee Sanders has said at the press briefing. She's making the point there is no collusion. But tell me, is this or is this not a bad day for President Trump?
No, not at all. I remember distinctly being in the Oval Office a few months ago, just the president, myself, and he said they will never find anything with regards to Russia and me because there is nothing. Think about this. This special prosecutor was impaneled to look into whether Russia colluded with the Trump campaign last year. And what are the charges they brought against Paul Manafort? That 11 years ago he did some dodgy wire transfers and that he did some work for the Ukrainians. So it's classic case of a massive mandate. They dig and dig and dig until they find something. No connections to the president, no connections to the election, no connections to his campaign. It is a literal witch hunt. But again, it's what the establishment does. When we found out last week, Hillary's campaign paid $12 million for the dodgy dossier of completely fabricated things about the president. they had to find some kind of response, and this is the distraction.
And so, is there any possibility of Hillary? Because, I mean, we're not just talking about that, but there was also some talk about a uranium deal that was done with the Russians some years ago. Is there any chance of the boot being on the other foot and her being looked at?
I think this is the beautiful irony of it all, when they realized they needed an excuse for why Hillary lost after spending $1 billion to defeat President Trump. They needed an excuse, and they came up with Russia, and now it's come to bite them on the backside. The fact is, the Clinton Foundation received $140 million from the Russian interest that bought 20% of America's uranium when she was the Secretary of State who had to okay that deal. That makes Watergate look like a little spat in a kindergarten sandpit. So, yes, they will rue the day. They will rue the day when they mention the word collusion and Russia.
You may be right in the long term, but in the short term, I know what CNN is saying. I know what the New York Times front page is going to say tomorrow. You know, they're going to say that it doesn't prove that Trump himself was directly connected, but the people that work for him had interests in that part of the world and behaved badly. And you know it's coming, and I know it's coming. And I just wonder, in terms of the president himself, you know, we've got this special counsel because he fired somebody quite important, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And he fired James Comey, who was the director of the FBI when that uranium scandal was being investigated, and nothing happened. And that dodgy dossier was briefed by James Comey to the president. Within minutes, he leaked it to CNN, and that's why we have a special prosecutor today, whose name is Robert Mueller. And this is where it really stinks to high heaven. Robert Mueller is best friends with James Comey. This is the old boy network, Nigel. This is the old boy network you fought against so valiantly with regards to Brexit and UK's independence. So this is just par for the course, but we're used to it, Nigel, and so is the president.
Yeah, yes. I mean, the fact they know each other doesn't necessarily mean that they're colluding, of course, and we have to be fair and balanced on that. But I put it to you, Seb, perhaps one of the worst mistakes Donald Trump has made as president was sacking James Comey, because that's what's led to a special investigator whose brief, it seems, can go way beyond its original remit.
Yeah, look, I think James Comey should have been fired on January the 21st, Saturday morning at 8 a.m. He is an individual who has put himself before law enforcement again and again and again. He's a grandstander. He's admitted in front of Congress to deliberately leaking his official documents to create the kinds of situation we're in today. So, yeah, I don't think it was a mistake at all to fire him, but he should have been fired much, much earlier. OK, well, I'm not so sure. You know, maybe you're right, but it does seem to me that his firing has led to this situation in which you've got a special counsel marauding virtually wherever he wants to go. I mean, some of these charges actually go back to the year 2006, and that on an inquiry that's supposed to be centred on 2016. In your view, where does this story go next? I think, you know, they will... look, if Manafort's done something wrong, then he should be prosecuted. A jury should decide on his guilt and his punishment, and that should be, you know, seen to be done properly and in accordance with the law and order. But I think we have to have a special prosecutor for the Uranium One deal and the dodgy dossier. And I think, not because of any collusion, but conflict of interest, my gosh, Robert Mueller must recuse himself, because he cannot independently investigate people, and Russia and Comey,
Okay.
these things are so intrinsically linked with his career.
And finally, tell me, repeat, you are 100% convinced, are you, that nothing will be found in terms of Trump, his campaign team, and collusion with the Kremlin?
I trust the president. When he told me they will find nothing, I believe him, and he's just going to put up with it, him and his 42 million Twitter followers.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Seb Corker, Chief Strategist of the Make America Great Again Coalition and former Deputy Assistant to President Trump. And before I give you any views of my own, let's go to a new caller to this show, Shanjan, who's calling from Bradford. Good evening.
Evening, Nigel Farage.
Hello, welcome to the show. So what do you think? I mean, this is going on week after week, month after month. We keep being told that Trump has colluded with Russia. We keep being told that I'm a person of interest to the FBI. I'm hearing that UKIP's been funded by the Russians.
I just believe it.
So do you treat all of this with scepticism, yeah?
Yes, I'm a Eurosceptic, and I totally disbelieve what is being said by the mainstream media. I think the reason why they're angry with Russia is because they haven't got it with their way in Syria and the Ukraine. That is why.
Well,
Ukraine, Syria, or in Western Europe is blame it on the Russians.
and okay, well that may well be true, but equally, do you think? I mean, when you see President Trump speaking and saying there is no collusion, do you believe him?
Yes, I do, because I can't see any link between him and Vladimir Putin. They got very different views. For example, if you look at Russia, they're very close to some of the people that Trump would regard as enemies, like Iran and also North Korea, for example. So I don't see any link between it. But it's not just this. I see this propaganda that's being fed by the liberal left-wing media, not just about Russia, but also about Saudi Arabia and Theresa May's links to it. It's just, it's this new form of, trying to, make everyone outside of the EU look bad.
Well, I tell you what it is, Jan. Behind all of it is there are vast parts of the establishment on both sides of the Atlantic that simply cannot comprehend that in 2016, the darkest year of their lives, Brexit and Trump happened, and there must have been a reason for it. It must have been Russian collusion or lying in the case of the Brexit campaign, and they are desperately scrambling around for reasons to justify why they lost. Jan, new caller from Bradford. Thank you. In a minute, I'll tell you what I think. On the day that 3 of Trump's former campaign aides are indicted for offences, financial offences chiefly, some of them going back to 2006, the argument that we heard from a former, deputy assistant to President Trump was that none of this had anything to do with 2016 and collusion with the Russians, and they're barking up the wrong tree. Well, I have to say, I do genuinely believe that. And I believe it as much as anything because they've done their absolute best to link me into all of this. I am somehow at the centre of this spider's web. I'm a bagman running stuff back and forth between the White House and between the Ecuadorian embassy where Julian Assange is holed up. I've been accused of the political party I led for many years, UKIP, being funded by the Russians. And I can tell you, the whole thing is a complete and utter load of nonsense, in my view. So I'm asking you tonight, do you believe Trump himself has been involved in some form of Russian collusion? And if you think, unlike me, if you think, Nigel, you are dead wrong, that you have your real suspicions and your worries and your concerns about this, then you can call me on 0345 6060 973. You can text me on 84850. You can tweet me using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and you can watch me live on Facebook and comment there too. Nigel, you are spreading the Trump disinformation campaign. Well, give me some evidence to the contrary, please. I don't believe President Trump has had anything to do with Russia. I think he's just being targeted, says Kathy. I wouldn't touch Trump with a barge pole. And if you have any integrity left, you should distance yourself too, Mary advises me. Mary, I'm not asking you whether you like Donald Trump or not. I'm not asking you whether you approve of the fact that I went and supported him in his campaign, and looking back, him versus Hillary. And by the way, my initial tweet today, when I heard who it was that had been indicted, that I was very surprised that it wasn't Hillary, because her links to Russia appear to be very strong indeed. In fact, much stronger on the evidence we can see than that of Trump or any of his associates. But Mary, I'm not asking you today whether you like him or like me. I'm asking you whether you actually believe there are serious grounds to believe that he did in some way collude in that presidential campaign, or whether this is frankly becoming a witch hunt from the left in America, who simply can't face up to the fact they lost in the elections. And I thought it was very interesting that 93-year-old Jimmy Carter, former president of the USA, probably the most left-wing of all the modern-day American presidents, very interesting that Jimmy Carter said never in his life had he seen a US president being given such a completely unfair run by the media in America, and that every attempt was being made to stop Trump from doing his job as the 45th president of the USA. And I thought, when that came from Jimmy Carter on the left of the Democratic Party, I thought, well, do you know what? At least there's some decency there. The problem is that Hillary, my friend, but Hillary and her acolytes still believe that somehow for her to have lost, something extraordinary, something illegal must have happened, rather than recognising that Obama, and this is, by the way, what Jimmy Carter said, that Obama didn't deliver for 8 years and Hillary was an unappealing candidate. And that, I think, is the truth of where we are. But hey, come and take me on. Tell me I'm wrong. That's what we do here on the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Mohammed is calling me from Oxshott. Mohammed, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. Nigel, always good to speak with you again. Just putting my cards on the table right up front. I'm not one of your biggest fans. I'm probably one of the biggest loathers of your crony, Mr. Trump.
Right.
And if you are going to get commentators on, please do us all a favor. Don't get failed party hacks like Seb Gorka. I think you're just lowering the standard of good commentary that you've otherwise provided in the last 5 minutes.
Well, Mohammed, the point about Seb Gorka is that, he was working there, literally next door to the Oval Office. He knows the president well. Now, we know, Mohammed, that he believes in what the president says. But I did want to quiz him about the sacking of James Comey, and I actually think that Seb Gorka is wrong on this. I think it would have been better for Trump to have lived with Comey as the FBI director, to have accepted he was imperfect. I think the sacking of Comey is what has led to this special investigation, Mohammed, which could go anywhere. So, I wasn't getting him on to say, Seb, I agree with everything you say.
Nigel, I agree with that. And actually, you and I are not always going to agree, but I tell you what I will agree with is I think that Trump miscalculated in firing Comey. I think he provided a natural spark and a trigger for the Mueller investigation. And I just want to go back a step. And I think let's not forget, before we get into the Huckabee pivots or the Gorka one-liners and the locker-up chants, let's please not forget, Mueller got appointed by Rosenstein when Sessions decided to recuse himself because he felt he was not able to make the decision impartially. So a Republican appointee had his deputy appoint a special counsel with powers which he is now exercising, and I believe should be allowed to lawfully continue to be exercised until such time as the investigation is properly exhausted. Now, what's been found right now clearly is not, I don't think by any stretch of the imagination, an indication of direct collusion between Donald Trump and Russia or Russian operatives or the Russian state. What it is circumstantial. It is unrelated information if you look at the money laundering aspects, etc.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Please, let's not be naive. We all know in prosecutorial strategy, you go for the smallest fish first, you hang the bait, potentially you get bigger ones further up the line. Mueller is doing what Mueller does best, and he has assembled a team of individuals who've done everything from Watergate to Enron. So let's give them a bit of credit, and let's not forget how they were appointed. So that's the first point. The second thing is this whole malarkey about Uranium One and, Clinton and Russia. With all due respect, again, it's another cute pivot. Uranium One only came into the headlines when Trump was being placed under pressure in the last few days. Suddenly, the whole story fled. Where was it for the several years that it's been around? Why did it go quiet? I've got the answer. It only became relevant because it became a convenient little pivot. And actually, if truth be told, if anyone wants to have a special counsel appointed, I say go ahead. It's within the gift of the Republican Party.
It is.
It's a captured Congress and it's a captured administration.
It is. And given the way American politics is, Mohammed, that may well happen. Although you have to say that the Hillary campaign did pay an awful lot of money to try and get information out of Russia about any links between Donald Trump and that country. That is true too, isn't it?
I mean, Nigel, without trying to sound defensive or partisan, I wouldn't be surprised if there is complicity, but I also can't discount how the Steele dossier and, such related information came into being in the first place. Who's to know? I think the reality is we'll all only know once all of the stuff becomes, much more clear and transparent and is flecked open in the light of day in proper investigations. What I would say, though, is let Mueller, if Trump has nothing to hide, it's as simple as this. If he has nothing to hide, stop sending tweets in capital letters, do something. You know, the only thing that needs to be done is for Mueller to do his job so that he can exonerate the man and the book can be closed on this.
Mueller will certainly do his job, Mohammed, although I have to say that it does seem to me that the brief is pretty wide. And the one thing I can tell you for certain, that if you think Trump should stop tweeting in capital letters, you got another thing coming. It ain't going to happen. Mohammed thinks that this should continue. We should see where it goes. Thank you for your call. Ahmed is calling me from Leighton. Ahmed, good evening.
Yeah, hello. I don't know as much as the previous caller about the ins and outs, but what comes across to me is how come there's such an issue with Russian involvement, and that no one really is, highlighting, AIPAC and the Israeli lobby and their involvement in American politics and elections.
Well, the Israeli lobby, that's a reasonable point, Ahmed, because there are about 6 million Jewish people living in America, so as a percentage it's quite small, but in terms of influence, it's quite big. But I don't think anybody... they have a voice within American politics, as indeed do the Hindu groups and many other groups in America. But I don't think anybody is suggesting that the Israeli government tried to affect the result of the American elections. I think, Ahmed, what it comes down to, in my view, is that Russia is seen by the European Union and by the Democrats to be the enemy. Putin is seen to be the enemy. We've done our best to expand the European Union, to expand NATO right up to his borders by encouraging Ukraine to join. And ever since that moment, he's been the great bogeyman. But I have to say, I would be amazed. I'm literally amazed. I certainly know from my perspective, I've had no Russian involvement or collusion, and I've not been a bagman, so I can speak for myself on this, 100%. I can't speak for the president 100%. Ahmed, you couldn't speak for your brother or your parents 100%. None of us can know 100%, but I would be stunned if anything came out that showed that any interaction with Russia had had any material effect on that election at all. That's how I feel, Ahmed. Is that your suspicion too?
Yeah, it would be difficult to prove, but I would say, what's the big deal? Even if it did, like I said, with Israel, they affect both Democrats and Republicans. They've got them both in their pocket.
Well, in terms of money and influence, yeah, they are a very powerful lobby. And Ahmed, actually, America's interfered in elections all over the world for decades. There's a slight sort of degree of hypocrisy about all of this. Ahmed, new caller from Leighton, I thank you. He makes the point that there are other very powerful foreign lobbies in the United States of America, and the Jewish lobby, with its links with the Israeli government, is one of those strong voices. As we discuss whether President Trump indeed did collude with Russia in this 2016 election victory, and some people think he possibly did. I think it's a complete load of baloney, and I say that because they try to drag me into it, and I know that's not true. But as we've been discussing that, and as Washington DC has been focused on that, today in Brussels, well, there's been a little visitor group turned up today to see Monsieur Barnier, the chief negotiator. And I wonder who wandered into his office today. Well, we had the ex-Liberal Democrat leader, Nick Clegg, the Labour peer, Lord Adonis, and veteran Europhile Tory Ken Clarke. And they went in today for talks with Monsieur Barnier and the European Union Economic and Financial Affairs Commissioner, Pierre Moscovici. We're told that these were not formal Brexit talks. Well, how could they be? Because these people aren't part of the government. But it's amazing, isn't it? We've been told that all these meetings were requested by the people who were coming to see Monsieur Barnier. His door is always open. Well, do you know what? I've had enough of him trying to divide and rule our country. It started off with the SNP. It started off with the leader of the Welsh Assembly. It started off with Mr. Corbyn. And now anyone that wants to stop or halt Brexit is welcome to go in and see Barnier. I think there's collusion afoot, genuine collusion afoot, between the people who support staying in the European Union and Monsieur Barnier. I genuinely do. Maybe we need a special counsel and a prosecutor to investigate all this. Anyway, I've had enough of this never-ending stream of Europhiles going to see the man who is tasked with negotiating Brexit. So, if you go to lbc.co.uk, you will see that I've just written a letter, which is there, up on the website, and I'm basically saying to Monsieur Barnier that you're conducting a never-ending series of meetings with political leaders on the issue of Brexit. And I want to make a request. As leader of the party UKIP, which won the European elections of 2014, I want to have a meeting with you. You are too busy listening to a group of people who wish to stop or delay Brexit. I want to come and speak for the 17.4 million who did not vote for a transition deal or any further delays and whose resolve is getting stronger. I look forward to hearing from you. So let's see what happens. Surely, if Nick Clegg is given the red carpet treatment, the least they can do is give me a glass of Perrier and listen to what I have to say. We'll find out. The other thing today that struck me a little bit was the Labour MP for Huddersfield, Barry Shearman, and he has said that better educated people voted to remain in the European Union. He argued that nearly all the university towns voted Remain in the June 2016 Brexit campaign, and Tory MP for Pudsey, Stuart Andrew, has accused him of snobbery. Mr. Shearman, of course, nearly all of the university towns voted Remain, because that's what they're being taught, and we discussed this yesterday. That's what they're being taught in schools and universities, and that is their universal view. I'd also point out to you, Mr. Shearman, that just because somebody goes to university doesn't necessarily mean they're better educated in life to make a decision about what's right for the future of the country. And I think your comments are pretty insulting, especially to your electors in Huddersfield who voted Leave. I guess you must be planning to retire at the next election, is all I can think. Back to the subject. Paul Manafort and two others have been indicted on charges by the special counsel who is looking into any potential collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign in 2016. No accusations like that have been made. Financial transgressions are what they've been indicted on. But I'm asking you, do you think Trump colluded? And if you do, why do you think that? I'm going to go to Stuart in Putney. Stuart, good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, there's a couple of questions. There's a couple of points. First thing is that Hillary got more votes, a lot more votes, before you say there's been a sea change.
In California, yeah.
Well, in the country.
Well, Stuart, they have an electoral college system, and Trump won it by a very big margin, all right? So let's just move on from that.
There's no sea change. And the other thing is, do you think that...
I tell you what, Stuart, there was a big sea change in the Midwest, wasn't there? And that's why Trump won the election. It was in those Rust Belt states. That is where he won the presidency from Clinton.
Do you think that he's an honest man? Do you think he's honest? Or do you think he tells a lot of lies?
I think he's honest. Of course I do. On a major issue, on something as fundamental as this, absolutely I do.
You do? Okay, well, then you're fit to analyse. Because everyone in the whole world can see
hang on, Stuart. Who have I called a liar? I haven't even called Mrs. May a liar. I might have been very critical of some of the things she said and done. I don't go around calling people liars unless I've got very good reason to think so. So, are you saying Trump's a liar, are you, Stuart in Putney?
Absolutely. Of course he is. Everyone in the whole world.
Of course he is.
The brain cell can tell that.
Right, so anyone with a brain cell can tell the president's a liar. Okay. So, is he lying when he says, he's been tweeting out today, in big capital letters, there is no collusion. Is he lying when he says that?
Very possibly.
Very possibly.
I don't know for sure. He lies about a lot of things.
Okay, so do you think that this special counsel is going to discover at some point that collusion occurred between him and Russia?
Between Trump and... possibly not.
Possibly not. Right, fine. So, are you prepared to accept that at some point before too long, the special counsel finishes and Trump carries on as president completely undamaged by this?
Undamaged, I'm not sure, but they might not be able to nail him. That's very possible.
So, I mean, why, Stuart, would he want to risk everything by colluding with Russia? Why would he have even thought about doing that?
It was before the election. He didn't know he was going to win.
And really,
his brother-in-law.
but a whole load of emails, a whole load of Democratic Party emails did appear through WikiLeaks, through Julian Assange. But he made it absolutely clear his source was not the Russians. There is, Stuart, what I'm saying to you is this. There's been this, and I think it's a wild conspiracy cooked up by the left in America, who can't accept the fact that Trump is their president, and I haven't seen a single piece of evidence to date to suggest that any of it's true.
But you think he's honest and not a liar, so I can't take it seriously.
All right, fine, Stuart and Putney, that's fine. He thinks the president's a liar. He may be prone to exaggerate a little bit here and there. He may occasionally not get his facts 100% right. There's a very big difference between that and outright thinking the man is a liar, because it is quite a serious charge. It's not one that I chuck about, cheaply. Andy in Cardiff is my next caller. He's called the show before. He's a thinker on political issues. What do you make of it, Andy?
Hey, Mr. Farage, how are you this evening?
Good evening. I'm fine. I just wonder when they're going to give up. I just wonder when the Democrats and many parts of the establishment in America will just wake up to the fact that Trump is the president, get on with it.
Well, there are a few things I want to make very clear, and I'll be very, very quick with this. Firstly, I don't believe for 1 second that Mr. Trump actually colluded with the Russians. That's number one. But on the back of that, there are two very, very good reasons as to why I think that President Trump will look back on these stories and be happy that they broke when they did. Mm-hmm. And the first point is that not more than a week ago, it was suggested in the press in the States that Hillary Clinton, her funding of looking into collusion with the Russians, the payoffs or the suggested payoffs that had been made to people to say that there was collusion with the Russians, that failed. That's number one. And that breaking no more than a week ago, then suddenly this story breaks to say Donald Trump colluded with the Russians. That's a typical Clinton family deflection tactic. If something's going to break in the news about you, you break something about somebody else that actually detracts from you. That's number one.
Yeah, j'accuse. Accuse the other person in the office of wrongdoing when it's you that's doing it yourself. Yeah, no, I understand that, Andy. I mean, do you think, Andy, that questions about the uranium deal, about money that went to the Clinton Foundation, about the 33,000 deleted emails, and about the large sums of money that the Clinton campaign spent to try and get a dossier with help from sources with big Russian knowledge to damage Trump's presidential campaign, is there a chance that this huge witch hunt against Trump could actually in the end bounce back on Hillary?
I hope it does, and I really do believe that it will. And just to very tie this up, point number two, we were talking about Mr. Comey earlier as well.
Yes.
Should he have actually sacked him? A lot of people believe that he should have kept him in office.
I do.
He'd have been a better ally. I don't believe that he would have done. I think that he sacked him at the right time. If what he released after he was fired is any reflection on this man's character, then leaving him in that position for longer could have actually accumulated more information that could have been transformed into dirt at a later date.
Possible, Andy, but my impression is that virtually the entire Washington establishment is against President Trump. So it wouldn't have mattered much who was in that position. I mean, that is a town in which has become very big and very fat on the back of big government, huge buildings. And every time I go to DC, I see more tower blocks being built to accommodate yet more people that are working inside that beltway. And for the first time ever, they've got a president saying, we want to cut back, we want to slim down, we want to pay you less, we want to get rid of you. Andy from Cardiff, I thank you. I personally think getting rid of Comey is what's led directly to all of this. Not that I believe Comey was perfect. Trump collude with the Russians. Do the Russians have this great sway over the American electorate? Jen says on Facebook, if the Russians could interfere with the USA elections, you wouldn't have had 8 years of Obama. True, Obama and Putin did not like each other very much. And Peter says to me on Twitter, please tell us, why did you go and see Assange? And why did you refuse to answer questions by journalists about the meeting? Peter, you obviously didn't listen to the Nigel Farage show on LBC yesterday, where I answered this in full. Go to lbc.co.uk. The answer is there. Gosh. And I even took someone, Peter, when I went to meet Assange. A producer from LBC came with me. And I made the point, if you look at the clip, do you think LBC are part of this great international conspiracy? No, it just shows what a load of complete and utter baloney it is, Peter, and I won't be answering that question ever again to anybody that answers it. I've done it. It's gone. It's gone. Matt is a new caller from Hackney. Matt, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. So, do you think that Mr. President colluded with the Russians?
He absolutely did, yeah. It's absolutely obvious. And I think the first thing I'd just like to say is this absurd idea that this is some sort of left-wing conspiracy. First of all, the opposition research that's formed the Steele dossier was commissioned by who?
Go on.
Well, it's the cop. It was Republican in a primary challenge, and then you carry on. You think, okay, so who's James Comey? Is James Comey is Democrat? No, he's a Republican. And Mueller, combat Marine turned lifelong Republican. This isn't some sort of left-wing conspiracy.
No, this is not just about a left-wing conspiracy. If there is a conspiracy against Trump, it's an establishment conspiracy. And that's a very different point. You know, I've said earlier, Matt, that Washington doesn't like Trump, and that is certainly true. But look, tell me, why do you think he colluded with Russia? Why would he have colluded with Russia? What was in it for him, Matt?
Right, Nigel. So we're clarifying that together, are we? It's not a left-wing conspiracy. That's correct.
It's an establishment conspiracy.
It's an establishment conspiracy.
The left are the loudest in shouting, but actually there are many within the Republican Party who still cannot stomach Trump as their president. Of that, there's no doubt, and that's why you saw in the Republican Party never Trumpers during that election campaign.
So just on this point, so I mean, just a question about collusion. You have to think about the people that have actually admitted collusion already within the Trump team. So Mike Flynn's lawyers have already had a public letter saying that he'll turn state's evidence against Trump. He was Trump's national security advisor. How do you explain that?
No, hang on. This is slightly different. This is rather like saying, I drank a large vodka last night, therefore I've got links with Russia. Flynn and others have had business relationships in the past with Russia that maybe they could have been a bit more forthcoming about. But that's a very, very different thing. To say you've had links with Russia, I mean, virtually nobody in international politics has not had meetings with Russians at some point in time. Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, met the Russian ambassador a couple of times at cocktail parties, but couldn't quite remember whether he had or what his name was. There's a huge difference, Matt, I put it to you, between that and actually plotting and colluding.
Jeff Sessions lied under oath many times about meeting Kislyak, so that's absolutely.
But Matt, I honestly, if you said to me, how many times have you met the Polish ambassador? And I had to swear under oath, I almost certainly would not tell you the truth. Because I would have bumped into him at a cocktail party. Who knows? I might have had a couple by the time I'd met him. I might have met 100 people that evening, and I would not have a full reflection of the events. And that's the case with Jeff Sessions. But look, Matt, we're getting very technical. How do you think, and you believe there was collusion, how do you think Trump benefited from the collusion that you believe in?
Okay, so if you look at, say, for instance, the third indictment, that's come to light today is George Papadopoulos, right?
Yep.
George Papadopoulos has actually admitted and now been charged and admitted lying to the FBI about his engagement with the Trump campaign in order to get emails to smear Hillary Clinton. So these are senior people within the Trump team who are admitting...
Matt, no, I'm sorry, but politics is a rough, dirty business. There's all sorts of smears and counter-smears go on in these political campaigns all the time. You seem to know the subject, to know your own mind very clearly. How exactly was any collusion going to help Trump get more votes?
Well, of course it will, because they're going to get the dirt on Hillary they asked for. Don Jr., let me ask you this then.
Hang on. But Hillary spent a fortune trying, $12 million, it's alleged, trying to get dirt on Trump and any links he may have had with Russia. So you could say they're both as bad as each other. I would accept that in campaign terms that both campaigns are as bad as each other. A comment that was made about the referendum campaign too. But this charge of collusion is one that suggests that somehow Trump got some material electoral advantage through working with the Russians. And I just, Matt, do not see that for the life of me.
Let me finish?
Go on.
So, Jeff Sessions met Kislyak at the Mayflower Hotel and agreed policy changes on Ukraine and about funding rebels in Ukraine. That was the agreed deal. That was the quid pro quo. what they got in return, and that's what Don Jr.'s emails proved when he lied several times, that they wanted dirt on Hillary, and that's what they got with the meeting with the lawyer in Trump Tower. There's absolutely no way they didn't collude. And if you look at Papadopoulos, he's actually admitted to the FBI that he lied to them about, and exactly about what. And if you actually read the indictments, because I have read the indictments, it actually states that he emails the Trump campaign with all the details about what's going to happen with the emails. There's absolutely no question about whether they colluded or not. The question is, will they get away with it? And the answer is probably not. And Trump knows it, which is why he's sending out tweets like, somebody do something, because he's panicking. Jeff Sessions has recused himself. Well, why would Jeff Sessions recuse himself if he wasn't guilty?
If Trump had got valuable information, then Hillary would have been indicted already, wouldn't she?
Why would Mike Flynn give a proffer letter from his lawyers to the FBI if he wasn't guilty? And he was fired for being a spy and not registering on the FARA Act. So they're guilty as sin, Nigel. You know it and I know it. And your friends like Dana Rohrabacher, they're going down.
I'm sorry, Matt. You can say all sorts of things about people around Donald Trump, and why Russia? You know, it could have been Brazil. It could have been all sorts of countries in the world that these people have met with and talked about and discussed policy. That's kind of what goes on in Washington all day, every day, and through into the evenings as well. Matt, you have your view, and you see these links and relationships, and you see some untruths that have been told, and I get that, but I do not believe that's the same thing as saying there has been a deliberate collusion that has led to material advantage. Both campaigns sought to get dirt and information on the other. They're as bad as each other. Elections are like that. I thank you, Matt, for the call. I've got time for one more caller this evening, which is James, a new caller to the show, who's calling from Leytonstone.
Yeah, hi. The reason why I called is I have this same discussion with people at work as well, and it appears that people don't have a lot of information as to what's actually really going on. So unfortunately, I think we've reached a really bad precedent in our world when it comes to the media. So imagine that you have a elected president who has people within his establishment who are actually leaking information to the press about him.
Yep.
Now, many years ago, let's say many decades ago, that would have been tantamount as treason, and such people would have been hung.
Are you talking about James Comey here?
Yeah, I'm talking about James Comey, and I'm talking about the other people that are actually probably still working in the White House right now, who are leaking information against President Donald Trump. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is this. When Hillary Clinton lost the election, she came out and said Russia. The problem is that no one has been able to establish what Russia actually did to affect the election. That's number one. Number two, the DNC haven't even handed over their email servers to the FBI, to the CIA, or to the NSA. So that's number two. Number three, Robert Mueller, who's been assigned to this case, he's actually widened the scope of it.
He has. No, that's right, James. James, that is right. James, I'm going to have to stop you. You've made 3 points. You've made them extremely well. We're out of time. The point's a very good one, that Robert Mueller has broadened the brief, and there are charges here that go back, in fact, to the year 2006. Look, folks, you know my view. I should not be a person of interest to the FBI. I'm not the centre of some extraordinary web. I'm not working with the Russians. UKIP wasn't funded by the Russians, and I have absolutely no reason to believe that applies to Trump either.